here today to discuss transition issue number 2, acquiring knowledge, and the theories, strategies, and principles that can help with this issue. See you in a minute. Victoria College's Total Learning Center presents Dr. Deb Explains, transition issue number 2, acquiring knowledge. Hi again. Today, I'm going to explain transition issue number 2, acquiring knowledge, and why this is such a difficult issue for college students. I also want to explain how Bloom's taxonomy and knowing about fixed and growth mindset, as well as the learning strategy of elaboration, can help overcome this issue. Some of you may be wondering why acquiring knowledge is such an issue for college students. And I think it's because the cultures that students come from, high school, home, and work, are not the same type of culture that college is in acquiring knowledge. For most people coming in from high school, it's a difference between pedagogy and andragogy. When you're in high school, your teacher provides you with all the information and you just do whatever the teacher says. In college, it's a little bit different. For example, the learner has to be more self-directed in college. You have to take charge of your own learning. The professor may present the information, but it's up to the learner to actually learn it. Once you're in college, you also bring more experience to the learning. You've had all of your schooling, you've worked jobs, so you bring more to the table. That makes your learning experience a bit different in college. It also means that you're more willing to learn. In high school, you show up and you do what you're told to do, mainly because you have to. But in college, no one's forcing you to do anything. They present the information and it's up to you to learn it. And as an adult, you're paying for this now. So you should want to learn that material and you should be more motivated to learn it. The other difference comes from the reason that you're learning it. Like I said before, in high school, you were just told to do it. You didn't really have a reason for doing it other than to make a grade. In college, it's a bit different though, because now what you're learning is supposed to help you in your future career. So you want to do a better job at it, and you have a reason for learning what you're trying to learn. All of this just means that you are not used to this new type of learning, and it takes a little bit of time for you to get used to it. Even if you're transitioning from the home or the workplace, most of that training and learning isn't the same as what you see in college. At home, you learn it because you want to or you have to, but you're not really tested on it. And in the workplace, it's more hands-on training. You're given a job, told what to do and how to do it, at least if you don't have a career yet. So college is a little bit different in acquiring this knowledge. You need to be more self-directed in college. That means that you need to plan, assess, and monitor your own learning on a daily basis. You need to think about what you know and don't know. You also need to think about what you're going to do to accomplish those tasks that you're assigned. What strategies are you going to use? And then you have to assess whether or not you've actually learned the material way before, or hopefully way before, you're given your exam. So let's talk for a minute about what it means to actually learn. We have some terms in the course guide: think, know, and learn, that sound like they're all the same thing, but they actually aren't. Anyone can think. Thinking is just to have an opinion or a belief or an idea about something, and you really don't have to have it based on any fact. For example, I don't like the color brown. That's my opinion. I don't know why I don't like the color brown. I just don't. That's what I think about the color brown. Do I actually know anything about it? That's a different story. To know means to be aware of something through observation, that's watching, inquiry, asking questions, or just basic information. For example, I know that Michael Jordan was a great basketball player. I watched him play in some games, and I know this information. I also know that Columbus sailed to America in 1492. It's just basic information that I have. But I didn't learn either one of these things. To learn is to gain knowledge or skills through experience, by studying, or by being taught something. So you can learn by having an experience. We learn all the time. We do something, it doesn't work, we try it a different way the next time. That's learning. We can study, especially in college, and we can learn that information. Or we can be taught the information. So all of these are very different. Once we're taught the information and we learn it, then maybe it becomes something that we know. Obviously, we want you to think about your learning. all the way through. So once you are presented with information, we want you to question it, to know, to have inquiries about something. We also want you to have opinions and beliefs about it, but we want those beliefs and opinions to be based on knowledge or facts. Part of the structure of our course, Learning Frameworks, is to provide you with the framework or the basic structure for how learning happens. We think that once you actually understand these learning theories and you know how people learn, then it will help you learn in this class, your future classes, your personal life, and in your career. So our class provides you with the basic structure for learning how to learn. The ultimate goal of this is to transfer that information. We want you to use the information that you're learning in your courses today, in your other courses next semester, a year from now, or in your career in the future when you graduate. That idea of transfer is being able to apply and use information from one course in another course, or it's simply being able to take something from the textbook and apply it in a real life situation. One of the biggest issues that students have is when they come to the test, they often see a problem or a question and they're like, we didn't learn that. Why are we being tested on that? In reality, you probably did learn it, but it was an example or a basic structure of an idea, and they just applied it, put it into some new form or shape, and they expected you to transfer that knowledge. Applying is actually one of the levels of Bloom's taxonomy, a taxonomy being a classification of items. So Benjamin Bloom created the taxonomy of thinking or learning, and he divided it into 6 levels. The bottom levels, remembering and understanding, are the lowest levels of thinking or learning. Remembering is simply memorizing, and understanding is being able to put things in your own words. So that's why we ask you to summarize to see if you understand each section of the course guide. The next level is applying, and that's what we're talking about when we're talking about transfer. We want you to be able to apply the information that you're learning in this course to another course or to your future. The upper levels include analyzing, evaluating, and creating. So analyzing is breaking things down by its parts, separating it out, comparing and contrasting. Evaluating is creating a judgment or having an opinion based on some of those facts, the analysis that you've done. I like to have my students compare Joe's Pasta to Olive Garden in the analyzing step, and then to tell or explain which one is the better Italian restaurant. That's evaluating. The highest level is creating, because you're creating something new that didn't exist before. It's important to know these levels of Bloom's taxonomy so that you can expand your thinking. It's also important to make sure that you're not spending too much time at the lower levels. You want to increase your thinking ability. So practice exploring and thinking about a topic or whatever you're learning about at all levels. So ask yourself questions and see if you can answer them. For example, start at the lowest level and see what you remember about the topic. And then for understanding, see if you can put it in your own words. What does this mean? And then applying, of course, you want to use it in another context. So how can I take this and use it here? Analyzing is comparing and contrasting. So how is this like this, or how is this different from this? And then evaluating is things like which one is better and why. And then creating is creating something new. So how can you make something new out of what you already have or what you know? So how can you use this in your classes? First, while you're reading, take the titles and subtitles and make them into questions. But don't just rely on what is. Make sure you do connections, like how does this relate to this? So that you're getting some of the upper levels of Bloom's taxonomy in there as well. You can also use this for your exams. When you're studying and you are provided with a list of terms or things to know for your test, make sure you know everything there is to know about the topic. For example, if we're talking about George Washington and you were given George Washington is going to be on your test, then you want to know who he was. When did he live? What did he do? What is his significance? What impact or influence did he have on another topic, such as crossing the Delaware, or any other term that your professor gives you? So know everything there is to know about the term And you can use Bloom's taxonomy to do that. So growth versus fixed mindset is another topic that's quite interesting when we're talking about learning. It's important for you to know what type of mindset you have, whether it's a growth mindset or fixed, and it can vary depending on the subject or the situation. For example, a growth mindset person believes that they can do or learn anything. This is abilities or skills or knowledge if they work hard enough and try hard enough. A fixed mindset person, in contrast, believes that they were born with a certain amount of skills or knowledge in an area or capability to learn in an area, and that once they reach that limit, that's as much as they can learn. A good example of this is, again, Michael Jordan. He wasn't born a great basketball player. He wasn't given the innate talent. He developed that through hard work. He practiced and practiced and practiced and became a great basketball player. Now, I could think, I don't have the ability. I'm not tall enough to be a great basketball player. That would be a fixed mindset, because if I worked hard, it doesn't matter how short or tall I am, I could be awesome at playing basketball. And that's a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset, where I would think that I couldn't do it because I was too short, or I wasn't born with the skills to become a great basketball player. So the way you approach your classes shows what kind of a mindset you have. When you receive a test or an assignment back, do you look at the feedback from your instructor, or do you just look at the grade? If you look at the feedback and you take that feedback to heart and you say, okay, I made this mistake. Next time I'm going to improve and I'm not going to make that mistake again. That's a growth mindset. If you look at the grade and you just look at the comments and say, okay, yeah, oh well, that's all I can do, that's a fixed mindset. So growth mindset people see mistakes as a way to improve, versus fixed mindset people believe that mistakes are just confirmation that they're not smart enough or they can't do well in that subject or area. Another way that they differ is that growth mindset people like to get outside of their comfort zone. They like to try new things, new challenges, because doing the same thing all the time, if it's easy, doesn't really mean that you're growing. You're not building any brain cells. A fixed mindset person likes to do the same thing, and they don't like to step outside of their comfort zone, because what if they fail? That might show that they are not smart or that they are not good in an area. So they don't like trying anything new. So why is this important? A lot of people, mostly women, believe that they're not good at math because they're female, which isn't true. Males or females can be as good at math as they want to be. All it takes is hard work and dedication and a whole lot of effort. We can all improve. Have you ever heard the expression, you can't teach an old dog new tricks? Well, that's not exactly true either, because our brains are built to learn and grow. They're kind of like a muscle. You either use it or lose it. But it doesn't matter if you've never heard of anything before. If you worked hard, you can build the brain power to understand and know whatever it is you're talking about. And this is all through brain plasticity. When you learn something, remember when we talked about previewing, and you already know something in your background knowledge, those two things connect and it starts firing neurons between each other. So it's easier to learn information when those connections are already built. So the more you practice it, the better and easier it gets. The first time you learn something, your brain's going to be looking around for something to connect it to. And if it doesn't have anything, it's going to create a neuron for that. And that first time, recalling that information is going to be hard. But the more you do it, the easier it gets. Two terms that go along with that is self-esteem and self-efficacy. Self-esteem is one's confidence in one's ability or self-worth. It's how you feel about yourself. How confident are you in college? If you have a high self-esteem, you're probably very confident. And if you think that you don't belong in college, you have a low self-esteem. And that probably has a lot to do with your mindset as well. Self-efficacy, on the other hand, is not the same thing as self-confidence. Self-efficacy is one's ability to perform a required skill. It may be connected with self-esteem in a small way, as you probably have some confidence in whether or not you could, say, do a layup. But Self-efficacy is more believing that you can. Do you have the skills? Do you have the knowledge? Do you know physically how to do a layup? And in terms of college, when you look at an assignment, the first time you look at it, you might think, oh my gosh, this is so hard. How am I ever going to write a 5-page paper? But once you do it, you realize it's really not that hard. And then the next time you come across the 5-page paper, you're like, I got this. It's cake, because of your self-efficacy. It's your belief that you can do it. Not because of your ability, but because you have the required skills. You've been taught how to write a paper. The next topic is elaboration, and it goes in with Bloom's taxonomy. When you elaborate, you find all of the information. You provide all of the information that you can on a topic. So you want to answer the questions of who, how, why, what is the significance, what is the relationship. For example, in the airplane picture, if you were studying motion and how airplanes work, you would want to know, how does the airplane stay up? What is lift? How does it work? What impact does it have? All of those things, every part. And that's elaboration. Now, you want to make sure that you elaborate when you are taking your tests, if you have to write any answers. You may think that your instructor wants just a short answer, but your instructor wants to know everything that you know on that topic. So it's much better to provide way more information than too little information. And elaboration can help you with that. You also want to keep that in mind when you're doing your assignments as well. Always, always elaborate. Provide way more information than you possibly can. And use all the levels of Bloom's taxonomy to help you do that. Cusio's basic principle for this chapter also deals with active involvement. It's 2 of his principles: read outside of class and work outside of class. And that goes along with acquiring knowledge as well, because you have to do that outside of class. You have to read your textbook to prepare. You should always preview the lecture material, the PowerPoint slides if they're provided, or the chapter before you actually go to class. This helps get your brain ready, like we talked about before, and it helps you remember things and provides you with the opportunity to see what you know and what you don't know, so you can ask questions. You also have to do work outside of class. So your instructors are not going to have as many assignments as you used to have in high school. They may only have 4 exams and then the final, and that's all your grade depends on. So there's not going to be a whole lot of homework. You have to be dedicated enough and use your time management well so that you can work outside of class to learn that material. And it's much better to do it every day after the lecture, review it the next day. When you go to class, you get new material, and then you review both of those all in 1 week instead of waiting until the week before or just a couple days before your exam. So it's really important that you read and do work outside of the classroom to help you acquire the knowledge that you need. I already mentioned the previewing, but I want to touch base on it again just to make sure that you remember it. So part of reading outside of class and working outside of class is previewing what's to come before you actually go to class. And you can find the topic of the day or the week in your syllabus. It gives you an opportunity to make a list of questions that might be confusing to you, so you can ask them when you actually go to class. And it helps you build that background knowledge. What do you already know on this topic? So that when the information is reintroduced in class, it helps your brain neurons make those connections, brain plasticity again, and it helps your brain grow and helps you remember it even better. And as you're reading, you want to take the time to summarize the information. That's why we build those boxes in each section of the course guide. You want to make notes and connect the material. So how does this fit in with this? For example, we're studying fixed mindset and growth mindset this week. When you worked with chapter 1, you were talking about motivation. How does fixed and growth mindset fit in with motivation? How does Bloom's taxonomy fit in with motivation? Find these connections and start thinking about the material in this way to stretch your thinking. You also want to review your notes as soon as possible after class. It would be really helpful if you could leave class and then try to summarize your notes. Jot down what are the key points. But even if you can't do this, then review your notes and see what you remember, see where the gaps are, see what you need to study a little bit more. And finally, I want to touch on communication, because communication fits in with both elaboration and Bloom's taxonomy. It also helps you when you're acquiring knowledge or to prove what knowledge you've already acquired. So you have to remember, no matter how you're communicating, whether it's orally, visually, or written, you want to make sure that you are communicating for the intended purpose and audience. So what is it that you're trying to get across to your reader or your audience? And make sure that you are delivering what you're supposed to deliver. You want to make sure that your language matches your audience. So if you are writing for a younger generation or a younger audience, you don't want to use a whole lot of big words. But if you're writing for your instructor, you want to sound smart and you want to prove that you know what you're talking about. So all of your language should be very academic in nature. Also, when communicating, you want to make sure that you give examples, reasoning, and evidence. So you make a statement like students need to attend class to do well in college. And then you back that up with an example. One of my friends didn't attend class and she didn't pass her class. Then you want to provide the evidence. What does research say or science say on this topic? Remember to cite your sources, or it's plagiarism. And then finally, you wanted to show your reasoning. How does that evidence that you just cited prove your point? What connection do they have? If you can do this, you'll be great at writing research papers and a great communicator, because everything you say will be supported with facts, evidence, and reasoning. That wraps up Chapter 2, Acquiring Knowledge. Stay tuned for Chapter 5, Learning How to Learn, which closely goes with this chapter, as Dr. Deb explains.